My name's Karen.
And good morning from me. My name's Alex. Unless you're watching from New Zealand, in which case, good evening.
You're also welcome. And as Matt said, we're going to mix things up a little bit this morning. So what we had actually done is we planned a more, a more sort of traditional service actually, but we were just reflecting, and the series of talks on Romans that we're about to begin, we just thought we would like to put those back for a week or two. Well, why have we done this? Well, because actually we feel it's right today to make some space to talk about some of the stuff that's been in the media recently. We want to address as well the matter of racism, which whilst it's a constant condition that's faced on an ongoing sort of nature by many people, it's actually been brought right to the forefront of our minds recently because, as Matt said, of the killing of George Floyd. What is racism? Well, racism is a belief that one race, one people group, is superior to another people group. And it results in the practice of treating a person, an individual, or a group of individuals, of treating them differently, of valuing them differently on the basis of their race. And the first thing we absolutely want you to hear this morning is that racism is the exact opposite of how God wants us to be. Because in Christ, the Bible tells us, we are all one. We are all equal. We are all loved by Him without exception. In fact, the Bible tells us more. The Bible actually says that the way God designed us was He designed us to have individuality, and that all of our many differences represent His multifaceted personality. In other words, we are all equally valuable to God in His sight because we were all made by Him, and our true identity is one that is found in Him. Now, we think it may be a defining moment in the history of racial discrimination. That's what it feels a bit like to us. And we thought, therefore, it was right that we should acknowledge George Floyd's death and that we should think about how we can readdress this process and the approach that we might take as individuals and as a church to the wider issues of injustice. Now, there are times, and there have been times in the history of the church, when the church has been apathetic. The church has turned a blind eye to injustice. It has done nothing. And when we think about those times, we are sorrowful. We're sorrowful. We are sorry for those times. But we recognise that indirectly, and at times even directly, the church has and does endorse racism and has ignored the plight of those who are currently on the receiving end of it. So as part of a move towards repentance and towards reconciliation and in the pursuit of justice, we felt it's the right time to focus on this, to denounce racism and to consider how we can respond to what's going on in a Christ-like manner.
If you've not yet seen the video footage of George Floyd being killed by police officers, we would urge that you do so, even though it is very unpleasant to watch. We urge you to do that because it's important that we know what happened so that we can become moved to stop it from happening again. If you've not yet seen the video, let me give you a brief account of what happened. On May the 25th, George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man from Minnesota, was arrested by three and held down by three white police officers on the ground, and he was handcuffed whilst he was being held down. One officer knelt on Floyd's neck for almost 9 minutes. A fourth officer prevented onlookers from intervening to save his life. And during the final 3 minutes, Floyd was motionless and he had no pulse. Officers made no attempt to revive him, and he was kept held down even when medics attempted to treat him. Floyd had been arrested on suspicion of using a counterfeit $20 note to buy some cigarettes at a nearby store, and several witnesses took videos of the incident which were widely circulated and broadcasted. And the video footage shows clearly Floyd saying, "I can't breathe," 16 times. And shortly afterwards, after being taken to hospital, Floyd was pronounced dead. The event has sparked widespread riots and peaceful processes across America and across many parts of the world, and it has drawn international media attention. And we were struck in particular as we watched the video of the nonchalant expressions of the officers' faces. They weren't angry, they were emotionless. It was as though the death of a man meant nothing.
And whilst the death of George Floyd was a single act of injustice, it's also symptomatic of a far wider matter, a much bigger matter, the matter of racial discrimination. His death follows high-profile cases: Michael Brown in Missouri, Eric Garner in New York, and many others that have driven what's called the Black Lives Matter movement in recent years. But for many, this outcry over his death reflects years of frustration over socio-economic inequality. Just days after Floyd's death, there was more video footage which emerged. This time it was 2 black college students in Georgia, a male and a female, and they were arrested for flouting a curfew which had actually been imposed because of the riots. They were unarmed, and they can be heard to say that they were unable to get home in time before the curfew started because the streets were gridlocked with traffic. They were in their car. But their reasoning was ignored. Their windows were smashed, again by white police officers, and then they were tasered and dragged from the car. One of the students had a fractured arm and needed 20 stitches. When slavery was abolished, it was replaced in many places throughout the world by segregation, and it remains a prominent matter felt by people today, even in our own church. Our Vineyard Church has been, or is currently, made up of people from 18 nations, spanning 6 of the 7 world continents. And as leaders of the church, Alex and I are absolutely delighted to have people from all nations worship with us. And we want this morning, as a leadership team and as a church family, to be crystal clear that we believe racism is wrong. That everyone is welcome. Everyone is welcome in our church and in the Vineyard Church. And from speaking to other church leaders across the city in Sheffield, we know that this view is held through the wider church family too.
Earlier in the week, I called a couple of friends who are black because I recognise that we are white middle-class people, and we wanted to get their perspective. One of the people I called was Gloria. She's a black woman, solid Christian. Many of you know her if ever you've been to Vineyard before the COVID season. She's a really good friend of ours, and she's one of our worship leaders in the church. I called Gloria and I called it as I was walking around the block, one part of my walk, and I asked her how she was feeling in light of the current heightened media coverage of racism. And Gloria's response, it was really passionate and really heartfelt. And as I was listening to her, I felt that there was something here that I think that everyone should hear. And so we agreed that I would go home and ask the same question, and for her just to repeat it on Zoom, and that we would record it and play it to you this morning. Gloria was happy for me to do that, and so we're going to show that to you now. What I would just say is that other than what I've just now shared, absolutely no preparation went into the interview, and it is raw, it is passionate, it is unpolished, and a heartfelt response. And we felt that was important for us to show you that. And I would say that if, like us, you are white middle class people and you're not in the firing line of racism, then please listen to this. The conversation was about... well, firstly, just tell us a little bit about yourself. You're from Nigeria originally.
I am.
And so how do you feel when you see that on the news, the coverage relating to George Floyd?
It's still raw. It's still very raw. But I think the coverage is good. The fact that we can see more of these things. But the problem is that there's so many that we can't see. And I think that's why people have taken to the streets to protest. Because I bet that I can't think of anyone that is my friend who doesn't know someone who has been accosted by the police in some way, that's a Black person, or that hasn't experienced, racism in some form. And it's even worse when it's the people that we expect as a society to protect us. People would expect that the police is in charge of law and order and safety and blah, blah. But a lot of people don't know that these things happen. For us, for me, it's nothing to 2-3 weeks ago, well, probably a month ago now, we've been seeing stuff about Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed in the street in February, and it only just came to the forefront like 2 weeks ago because his killers were finally apprehended by police. And but for us, we see these things happen all the time, and we know of it. I can't even count the amount of times I go onto my Twitter page and it's another person who's been killed, another person who's saying, my brother lost an eye because of the police, he was shot with a rubber bullet or something. It's exhausting. My main feeling, my first feeling about all of this was just rage. And I'm really praying about it because I don't like that feeling of just it's not a place that I want to be. It's just rage because I'm really annoyed by the fact that people that look like my dad, people that look like my brother, people that look like me, are seen as less than, are considered as not human enough to be given, dignity, even if they needed to arrest anybody. It's painful to watch. I can't watch that video. I can't watch it. As soon as I saw when the day it happened, because I have a lot of American Twitter followers as well. The day it happened, the video was first thing on my screen, and as soon as I saw another Black man on the floor being pinned to the ground, I couldn't watch the video because it reminded me of when Philando Castile was killed by police. Was it 4 years ago? I will never forget that feeling, and I do not pray that anyone experiences that feeling of helplessness. That what could he have done? What could he have done right? Um, there was nothing. There was nothing that he could have done that would have prevented that. There's no. You can't look good enough. You can't dress well enough. You can't speak well enough to be considered human, for your humanity to be considered, and it drives me balmy. It's frustrating, and to know that women live in fear that their sons may not come back home for going to the shop to get Skittles like Tamia Rice. People live in fear that their sons may not come home from a run like Ahmaud Arbery that was killed in February. That's just jarring. I have a brother, and I keep, every time I see something in the news like, oh, a young man was gunned down in London, or a young man was accosted by police. He was roughed up by police in London. I had to call my brother and be like, are you okay? Because even though he dresses nice, he looks well, he speaks well, it's not good enough. The first thing that they see is the color of my skin, is the color of his skin. And there's almost nothing that I can do to protect him. There's nothing that my parents can do to protect him. George Floyd has a similar physique to my dad. My dad is 6'3", and people would walk past him and see him as imposing straight away. And so if anything was happening in the neighborhood and police needed if they wanted to arrest somebody, he'll be the first person they look at. It's just, it's frustrating to think about that my friends cannot just walk around in safety and, in the knowledge that, yes, police are there just doing their job. I've always grown up with that since I came to the UK. I mean, even before I came to the UK, in Nigeria, we had issues. We always have issues with the police. But when I came here, I came here as I turned 16. So the thing I always just knew was don't talk to the police. Don't look at the police. If they're going past you, just look in the other direction and keep walking. I've never felt safe in that way, that, okay, yeah, the police are here, they're going to keep us safe. No, my usual thought is, let me just make sure I look as small as possible so that they can ignore me. And thinking about how George Floyd was treated for the sake of a $20 bill that may have been counterfeit. He didn't deserve to die for that. Lots of people make mistakes. Even here in the UK, that sometimes when you give a £20 note in the shop, they will look at it with UV light, and that's not worth killing over. It's really not. Imagine if I had a £20 note and I didn't know that it was counterfeit. Is someone going to call the police on me? And then the next thing, I'm killed outside a corner shop for trying to pay my bills. It's frustrating to think that there is nothing he could have done. He couldn't have. They're not going to ask him there. So, are you? Do you hold a doctorate in science? Do you dress well? No, it was just, oh, a black man has been accused of bringing a counterfeit bill. Let's arrest him. But no, don't let us just arrest him. Let's throw him around and hold him down like a chicken being held to slaughter. And it's just. The answer to that question is I feel rage, and I feel helpless, and I feel frustrated that this is still the story that we're living in today's society. It happened in 1991. before when with the Rodney King incident around the LA riots. It happened, and I was born in '92. That was before my lifetime. It happened then, and it's still happening. And people have complained about it. They've talked about it, but all that we hear is, well, if you could just do better, if you could just listen to the police, they won't do that to you. Really, really, he was in handcuffs. He couldn't have swung at a policeman. It's just no, no. I'm frustrated, and I've not slept well in a very long time because my mind is just not at peace. Like how much prayer can we pray? Every time my brother goes out, that I just pray that God protects him and he comes back home safe to us. It's ingrained in the childhood of so many Black children that you don't talk to police, you just walk past and hope that nothing happens to you. What was it? I was discussing with my mom about the fact that the ones we can see on TV, the ones like Judge Floyd's killing is a trigger. It's a trigger for a lot of people, but it was just on the edge. It's what tipped the balance because it's been building up. We've had so many incidents like this, but the ones that we can't see on TV are just as bad. Those people who weren't killed but were maimed, but were traumatized, they get to pass down that trauma to their children. And now there are more Black children that just learn that, I know what they did to my dad or to my uncle or to my elder brother. So I'm going to teach my children that they're not safe around the police. The police is the enemy. It's insane that that's how we have to feel as Black people. And I feel very helpless, but I choose not to lose hope. It's just very difficult to have hope because this is something that's been happening even before I was born, and it's almost like would it continue after I go? Would that be the thing, or would Jesus just come and take me? I'm done. I don't know. And it's very frustrating. Yeah, that's my very summarized answer.
Well, I mean, Gloria, thanks so much for your honesty and the passion in there as well. And what I like about that is that I think that it's just a personal feeling that I have, and that is that sometimes the church can be just a bit too quiet, and I just think that there seems to be a sense that that the racism works really well when apathy does absolutely nothing.
Yep.
And I think that the church does have a role to play in this. It might not be the same role as we get to see on the media. I think there is a response. I'm thinking it through, and I don't have the answers yet. But I think there's a way of standing up, not with violence, but with the opposite, really, with that peace, but with a peace that shouts really loudly. Can you sort of maybe expand that a bit? What do you think the church can do? What can we do as Christians to respond to not just this one incident, but the big picture that this incident has sort of brought again up to the boil, as it were?
Yeah. First of all, I'll say I don't know the full solution that we could, the exact solution of what we could do. But as you said, bad things happen when good people keep quiet. And there was a discussion that I was listening to by one of my favorite rappers. He's a Christian rapper, Propaganda, very funny name, but he has a song called Precious Puritans. And in the song, he was calling out the fact that the church played a passive but active role in slavery, that they were right there and they were talking about. I mean, they spoke to the slaves and said, "Well, you should be grateful for your position," or something like that. And they, although they were not the ones who um, actively participated in, bringing slaves over, they made space for it. They accommodated it, and every time I listen to that song, it challenges me that it's almost like history repeating itself. And there's a saying that if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. And I feel like the first thing that the church as a whole needs to do is understand what we've done before or what we haven't done before in situations where when during the civil rights movement, what did the church do? The civil rights movement happened in the 60s, and a lot of the people who were part of the civil rights movement were Christians. They were Black Christians, and they mobilized in churches. And so we need to go back and look at our history so that we don't repeat the same mistakes, because a lot of people who feel that Black people should have kept quiet, they go to church too. They go to church, and so we need to look back and see what we've done before, and then or what we haven't done, and amend that. And we, from a Christian standpoint, even before that, I think as a collective, as a church, we need to what's the word? We need to apologize to God for not taking action about for His own children, because the church should be the safest place that anyone should be a part of. A lot of people don't know about God, but they know about church. And so that should be the one place where people should feel safe. We need to have forums where people can speak about their experiences. I know there are many churches that do things like, forums for maybe abused women or something like that, and we can reflect that for Black people in some way. It may not be explicit, like just explicitly there, like for Black people, but it should be, we need to make space. We need to state that we're making space for people to talk about these things, because many people are traumatized. But then as a church, we can speak. We have a voice. We do have a voice. It may look like our voice is diminished, but we can speak. Of course, we can pray as well. We are called to pray. The Bible says, "Pray without ceasing." We should pray, but also, faith without works is dead. What's your work? Go out. Make petitions. Write sign petitions. Write a letter to your MP. What are they doing in your constituency about things like that? Because it does happen, but a lot of Black people will not go and report an incident that happened, but they may talk to people. And once you hear of something like that, ask, can I write a letter to my MP so that they can bring it up? Can I do something like that? just those little things make a difference. It's the way that our voices can get heard in Parliament. It's the way that more people get to know that individual churches are doing things, but also the church as a whole is doing things. And in our little, I know that for a lot of churches, they may not be, they may not have as many Black people that attend their churches, but we can collaborate with other churches as well. We can listen to them. We can have missions. We should have missions to our community. That's not just about physical things, but about spiritual needs. That's and about mental health. Just those little things does count to for people to know that there's a safe haven here. My church here in Wolverhampton had a little. I think they still have it. They set up a bin for people to return knives. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And this was years ago that they've had it. But the point of the fact that people can see that, they know that you can go to church and talk to them about what happened, or what did you do, or what was done to you. And I feel like we need to make it plain. That's a Bible verse, something like that. Make it plain, blah blah blah, and just be outright in your support rather than being coy, because being silent is almost the same as agreeing with the problem. Is almost the same as saying if the problem's okay. So I don't know, but hopefully one of those things makes a difference.
That's really, thank you so much again. And we'll bring a pause to this particular discussion, but the bigger conversation, I hope, will continue a lot longer. Again, Gloria, thank you so much. You bless all your family, and we love you so much. So thank you very much for being part of this. That's great.
Thank you.
So yeah, a big thank you, Gloria, not just for your honesty, but for your willingness for us to share that as part of this morning's worship time. And what we want to do is we want to go on and worship some more, and just set aside some time within that worship space to pray, to intercede, to ask for forgiveness. We felt it was really, really right to do that. And in a minute, Matt and Hannah are going to come back and lead us. But just perhaps so that we can just tease out some things. When Alex and I were thinking, we thought there is perhaps some things that we can reflect on. And I think they'll be coming up on the screen now. But the things we were thinking were things, we were thinking of a few things like this. We were thinking, firstly, we're called to listen and to be actively informed. Gloria touched on knowing our history so that we don't repeat it. So there's something about actually taking some responsibility ourselves to be informed and find out what has happened, what is happening, and what might happen. Galileo said, I do not feel obliged to believe that the same God that has endowed us with senses, reason, and intellect has intended us to forgo all of those. So, we need to use our brains, actually, actively engage our brains. So that was the first thing. The second thing we were thinking of is, we have an opportunity to speak. Again, as Gloria was saying, there is a time for us to speak up, whether it's to speak out, whether it's to write, whether it's to sign, whether it's to engage in conversation. But there is a time for us to speak. Now, it might mean that from time to time we make mistakes. We all make mistakes. But, it is better to try and to fail whilst trying and eventually succeed than actually to do nothing at all. So there is a time to speak out.
third thing we can do is that we can ask for forgiveness. I'm reminded of Nehemiah. He once said this. It's Nehemiah 1:6-7. He said, "I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my family's house, have committed against you. We have acted wickedly towards you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and the laws you gave your servant Moses." And you know, Nehemiah was a good and godly Israelite man, but he saw that his own people were struggling to follow God and his ways, and so Nehemiah, as a representative of his people, took personal ownership of the wrong that had been done and confessed as though he had done that wrong himself. And I think there's a place for us to take ownership, not only for the wrong that we personally have done, but also for the wrong that our wider family, the church, has done in the past. And then fourthly, as we enter into the battle, we have been given weapons by God. God has given us an armour for battles such as this. You can read more about them in Ephesians chapter 6. He's given us truth and righteousness, peace, faith, salvation, and the sword of the Spirit. Now, I've written a short explanation of what those things are, literally just a sentence, and that's going to be posted on the Facebook chat section now, and you can read them either now or sometime later. But immediately after writing that, Paul wrote this. It's Ephesians 6, and it's verses 19 to 20. He said, "Pray also for me, that whenever I open my mouth, words may be given, so that I will fearlessly make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains. Pray that I may declare it fiercely as I should."